the United States of America, prosperous, free, and neutral. Those were the promises that the First Weltkrieg brought. However, the United States of America in the late 1920s, once free to thrive, was growing increasingly stagnant and, worst of all, overdone by the successful workers' revolutions across the pond. The Grand Old Party, the Republican Party, had its leadership become the scapegoat for all the problems of the United States' 16th decade. Under Presidents Woodrow Wilson and Mitchell A. Palmer, America's boys watched as Europe embraced fire and autocracy. America, once the prominent force on the continent that protected the British exiles and the capitalist world order, had grown bitter, hateful, and now social-politically divided. Perhaps a rising force, a new concept, an old school, could be the only cure for the illness of America. Perhaps democracy was the one thing holding us back. This is the story of our great American empire. George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, great men, their flagship title now held by Herbert Hoover and Vice President half Native American Charles Curtis. Now, Hoover isn't a bad man. He was the right man for a different time. But now, when the economic overhaul was paramount and necessary, he lacked the political willpower or the willpower himself to overthrow his party and system. His greatest idea to solve the Depression was, for some reason, taxing and ending all trade. Obviously, this was stupid, but stupid times call for stupid measures. Despite the trade bill, the country was split between a number of different parties, each engaging in rampant political violence and corruption to gain an upper hand, both of which the political system wasn't quite designed for. From Norton Syndicalists to Huey Long's Farmer Populist America First Party, not to mention the crumbling Democratic and resurgent Old Democratic Party, Hoover and his liberty-loving Republicans didn't stand a chance. Working with the Socialist Party, however, Hoover just managed to skirt past the Garner-Wagner trade bill into the Congress. In another death blow to capitalism, Black Monday, racking the entire world, didn't help anyone, and those equality-loving Cindies started embracing more totalitarian forms of their ideology. The passing of the Garner-Wagner trade bill was one thing, the enforcement of it was another. A syndicalist revolution in Cuba undermined more confidence in the already husk of a man, Herbert Hoover, but that didn't stop him from attempting to influence the country's policies. The presumptive Republican nominee, Charles Curtis, for the 1936 election had fallen ill, and the only man capable enough to guide the country into another 4 years was our boy, Herbie Hoover. Third term, baby. Industry still barely chugged along, so the growing interventionist side of Herbert Hoover enacted more large federal programs to grow employment and job opportunities. This still didn't quell the populists who won a few special victories in special elections, or the people themselves in the May Day riots, but our, oh my god, Columbia industry was going to get back up and running. Herbert Hoover was on the campaign trail pushing shipbuilding acts despite minor setbacks in the form of a couple assassination attempts, though some leaders of the northeastern states have secretly met to form contingency plans in case of increased civil unrest. Interesting. With Canada refusing payments and the party shrinking, it was official. Hoover was boned. Political violence continued, and we were nowhere closer to a better tomorrow. Well, hey, maybe building the Pentagon will get the people back on track. Despite all this, the election comes and 6 different candidates duked it out in the incredibly stupid Electoral College, and oh my, while Oswald Mosley wins the party over across the pond, we turn to say congratulations, Mr. President, 4 more years and a new VP. Hoover's third term started off with a bang, and I mean an actual bang because despite our noble president's attempts at stomping out the Hoovervilles, reducing unemployment, embracing trickle-down economics, and making sure there's a chicken in every pot, an anarchist proceeded to blow his head off. How unfortunate. At least Mr. Knox was well equipped to, and Douglas MacArthur has overthrown democracy. That's a shame. And as the federal functions give their final death throes, the racists, the farmers, the workers, and, everyone kind of jumped off the sinking ship, it appears as though the Second Civil War has almost begun. With that ship, I was no different. To the West Coast we went, embracing the last stand of democracy that existed in the USA. Led by a provisional Congress, the Pacific States of America quickly set out on the number one goal: doing nothing, or not going to war, basically. Quickly organizing a new military structure and rebuilding, the government watched as protesters made it clear that the western frontier did not want war. Residents of California, Washington, and Oregon now only completed the Golden Gate Bridge, but also reached out to Huey Long. Perhaps then we could organize some sort of peace for our Pacificans. A couple rough demands later, and we were set. With the Federalists still in the Rockies, we were safe from the Nasties and the Cindies. For now, we had peace. But some wanted to go further. Some wanted succession. Oh crap, the violent protest actually worked. Wait, that isn't a protest. That's a military coup. Oh, hi, Henry H. Arnold of the Pacific Defense Force. Well, as we start to organize a wartime government, military, junta, we're forced to make a choice. The secessionist movement that Arnold represents had a choice between siding with the realists, those who wish to fight with Douglas MacArthur's Federalists in exchange for recognition of Pacifican sovereignty, or the dreamers, who say we should not cut any deals and instead focus on militarizing the Pacific States against those who might want to charge against them. Of course, these guys had no contingency should one of the victors demand readmission into the Union. Obviously, we think hard about the geopolitical consequences, and Arnold will definitely consider which one will give a bright future for our and he chose the riskier militarist option. Gotcha. Well, he has a secessionist republic now let's get the proper flag for the Union. Oh, that looks like shit. Let's pick a better one. Yes, California supremacy, I might add. Well, at once, Canada annexes New England. We'll deal with those jerks later. A choice about our interim president becomes apparent, and MacArthur's deadline for readmittance is finally up, so the Civil War actually begins. Obviously, I can't give up the awesome opportunity to have Walt Disney as the leader of our government, as our free world falls to disarray and tyranny. Well, the USA is the only important one anyways. We're making it into Disneyland with this one, boys. Disneyland is the one in California, right? Oh, yeah. Oh, hey, Fred Trump, father of the unborn future president Donald Trump. Funny seeing you here. Well, hey, we got work to do, gentlemen. Unfortunately, the pro-secessionist protests have died out, and they're pretty much replaced with pro-intervention riots. Good Lord, what do these people want? As much as I'd love to march towards Washington, we just can't leave a trail of corpses just yet. So we'll stick to the West Coast city on a hill for now. Now that we've evolved into the final country tag, it's time to organize our war machine. With Disney at our helm, nothing is impossible. Unfortunately, before Disney could absolve his dream of forcing everyone into the Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, that pro-intervention crowd proved that violence yet again works. And Walt Disney has gone the way of the dodo, aka Herbert Hoover. Still not over that, by the way. Walt Disney's vice president, one Howard Robert Hughes, has taken lead of the nation. He found himself to be in the unique position of forming a dictatorship, dare I say it, an autocracy. Howard Hughes, the head of the house, one could say, saw an eccentric future for the Pacific States. First, Hughes set out on securing the Las Vegas Strip, prime real estate for the city of tomorrow. Sure, what's left of the Pacific Congress would try to limit his moves at every turn, but this was the great Howard Hughes we're talking about. The only thing stopping his libertarian paradise, so to speak, was his own imagination. Basically schizophrenia. Mr. Hughes was going to build a metropolis in the desert. He was going to conquer all, secure the nation against all threats, foreign and domestic. Mr. House was going to be a savior of America, Earth, and eventually all mankind. He will launch us into space. Oh, and House got overthrown by the Congress, and he's now a shadow puppet. Womp womp. Well, Arnold now has the time to launch a second counter-coup to restore power. Good Lord, what is this, Turkey? It looks as though the Pacific States' internal politics are in such a mess, anyone could take power. Indeed, an old historical figure, one Joshua Norton, has resurfaced among the memory of many people in California. The idealization of a madman, homeless guy who once claimed he was Emperor of America started to grow and grow. With the success of Germany and influence from the British exiles' crown, the idea of a monarchy has appealed to millions who lost faith in the current system. So, after 2 coups and 3 violent marches, one last group, the imperialists, have rallied to the masses, thousands, to march on the Pacific in Congress to force a new government with new change. Indeed, the long-dead Norton has finally made its way into the halls of power. Henry Arnold and the junta government found themselves with no choice. Sparing the bloodshed, they relinquished power to the imperialists of America. Finally, against all odds, and after like half a dozen different heads of state, the Norton restoration is complete. All that is left is to discard the old ideals of republicanism, the naysayers, the doubters, and reach out to the one and only living descendant of Joshua, the South African man, Charles Ross Norton. Sure, he might not have stepped in America ever, but he was more in tune than anyone else. Norton II, with some reluctance, had accepted the position and was welcomed into the new state with open arms. His first act, along with some other congressional amendments, was to repeal the 18th Titles of Nobility Amendment, so that the state now allowed American citizens to seek royal titles from an empire. Officially, now, the steps towards a monarchist state were almost complete. Norton sought to not repeat the actions of Arnold, Hughes, Disney, and the despicable Hoover. He solidified the groundwork for his new state, creating monuments to the first Emperor Norton, handing out titles of nobility to the highest bidder, and seeking to structure a new government. Who was this Emperor Norton, however? A South African, embracing a title that he is, admittedly, distantly related to, well, whatever this insanity is. However, the people have demanded his leadership, his mandate, and of course, the people know what has to be done. He must create a future, a better future, for all of Norton's loving subjects. Interestingly enough, to balance out the power of the rather large Californian state within the empire, Norton elected to divide the territories into new states. No longer will we have the state of California, but rather the state of Jefferson, the state of the Mojave, Frisco, and Angels. Rural Cascadia even became the state of Lincoln. With a little financial elbow grease, the parliamentary monarchy was finally starting to come to fruition. Law after law, undermining the previous government and enforcing the current, erased the Republican ideal, evidenced by his militaristic buildup, Bonapartism, the ideal that was given the position of emperor from the people, not from God, mixed with America's Enlightenment foundations, forming a unique set of ideals. Prussian constitutionalism, not tyranny, was welcome in Norton's America. An extensive de-republicanization campaign began at once, including the Golden Gate Bridge, now the Norton Bridge, in San Francisco, now Norton City, became the seat of the Nortonist power. It's not tacky at all. While embracing the remnants of American industry, the state turned. Norton I's title was not only just Emperor of America, but also Protector of Mexico. Norton II took up his uncle's title not only in spite of the absurdity of it, but with the goal of improving his citizens' lives in mind. Indeed, the establishment of the state was almost complete. Literal law was almost as important as buildings of power. Norton II demolished the Republican-esque San Francisco City Hall, seeking to build the greatest grand royal palace on earth, to rival all those in Europe and America. Indeed, the mix of American and European architecture was reflected in the announcement of a constitutional monarchy being formed. The Congress would now become a parliament, and the new parties clamored to seek the spotlight. Norton II refused to endorse a candidate or a party, simply stating that the destiny of the Pacific states lies solely within the people. Bonapartism at its finest. That included all the citizens of the Americas. The Emperor's Grand Armée prepared at once to mobilize to liberate Mexico. He didn't gorge himself. Norton embraced his busy schedule. His initial reluctance subsided, and he embraced his emperorship, traveling the country, meeting the impoverished, and writing decrees to help out others. He thus earned the unofficial title of the Charitable Emperor. And manufacturers have even begun creating Norton-themed marketable plushies. I'd buy one of those and put it next to my Emperor Norton Funko Pops. Oh, the wonders of AI. I'd honestly buy that. Actually buy the Norton II plushie, only $49.99 at the Curious Conman merch store. As Norton II issued a special military operation to liberate Baja California, the election for Prime Minister was brewing, and the campaigning was in full swing. The major nominees are, of course, the Democratic and Republican parties, but also the Democratic-Republican Party, known as the Liberal Party. Then there's the Progressive Party and Upton Sinclair's Radical Socialist Commonwealth Party. They each have massive sways over the populace, but we shall see who will come out on top. Yeah, this is a bit much. You're right, Event. As Norton continued to raise militia regiments for the upcoming battle against Mexico, he appointed Henry Arnold, now loyal to the Pacifican Empire, to be the chief field marshal in Operation Mexican Coca-Cola. As parties nominated their candidates, Norton declared war upon the Mexican Socialist Republic, seeking to unite the Californias into one union. This should be quick and limited, as we know that total war... Well, that's pretty brutal, I bet. Minor breakthroughs were achieved, and oh look, the parliamentary elections have rolled around, and in a surprising upset, Upton Sinclair's Commonwealth Party has secured a majority victory. Funny how that worked out, huh? Oh well, Socialist Upton Sinclair had a war against an impoverished third world nation to wage. Let's get to it. The Pacific states succeeded from the Union to save democracy. The Commonwealth Party's first victory was the only reassurance that people needed, that anything was possible. Upton Sinclair's government was stacked with progressives and democratically aligned socialists, and quickly began to work on one of the large government programs to address the remnants of Black Monday and the Great Depression to fix capitalism. That's what the Commonwealth Party represented, a hive, all working together under one queen, or a king, I guess that's more appropriate. Resistance members in the Western Command Territory and in Mexico flocked to aid the monarcho-socialists, and inch by inch, Arnold's operation liberated Baja California. I guess appealing to the right and left worked for this one. In addition, Upton Sinclair sought more to integrate the Mexican territory and people rather than subjugate him. We even banned racial discrimination. How cool is that? Oh well, time to spread democracy, liberty, and the monarcho-socialist government to the rest of America. God, the industrial state of Forlandia? That's even more tacky than Norton City, as Norton personally thanked both the Socialist Russian Republic and the autocratic Austrian Empire for their volunteers. The monarchy pushed deep into the mountains. The Commonwealth Party had actually become a bigger tent as the progressives flocked to be part of the successful coalition. Don't mind Upton, he's simply making the best socialist party on the planet. Who doesn't like progressive taxation? The wealthy? Since when we cared about them? Baja California was almost liberated, and Long's Union State troops pushed against the Pacific Empire. Our Air Force was no match for theirs anyways, and they were fighting a two-front war now. That was getting rough. Unfortunately, the Mexican Republic called for foreign aid, and the Internationale answered the call. Our monarchy is now standing its greatest test, not only against America, but against almost all of Western Europe. It was in the summer of 1939 that the Empire constructed the first M3 Eugene Debs tank, honoring the late socialist. However, these developments were overshadowed by France's declaration of war against Germany. Rightly so, the Second Weltkrieg had begun. We got a non-aggression pact with Germany of Bolivia, though. How cool is that? Division after division was conscripted. Each new state liberated brought more factories or more tanks for the war. Peace was becoming a distant memory. As Canada declared a war of reclamation against the Union of Britain, Norton reached out and to strengthen ties against the Internationale. Them being a similar ideology, social credit, helped the process a little. Monarchists have to unite, you know? Nation after nation dogpiled on top of each other back in Europe. Russia entered the fray, but the empire held strong. Norton's forced advance, and Japan even declared war with their territorial ambitions, but nothing could stop the Norton train. The weather got cold, but the troops grew en masse. And hey, we even got the support of the Mormon Church. As our top scientists embraced eugenics in the name of science, that's going to look bad in the future, we got an encirclement and Washington finally fell to the syndicalist forces. Fordlandia is so stupid, and the game crashed. Shit. Let's just try to fix the supply issues, okay? I can't believe it's that time of year again. The 1940 election has come around. Are the people impressed with Upton Sinclair's socialist policies? Yes they were. Unfortunately, Sinclair took the time to retire on a high note as the father of Pacifican socialism and the leader of the Democratic Socialist wing of the party, Henry Wallace, took control of the empire. Monarcho-socialism departed, and leftist Georgism became the new norm, which is an ideology that is extremely based. Wallace's first measure as president was to embrace his own beliefs in socialism, that Lenin was a semi-religious deity figure, that spiritualism is socialist, and, well, I'm not going to pretend I understand his Roerich belief, but it became official state dogma. Deeper and deeper, the army pushed into the Midwest, and President Wallace continued the good leftist fight. God, those are some beautiful green bubbles, with heavy foreign subsidies from both empires and monarchies, and effective state control of the industry. We were punching well above our weight, liberating both the longest state and the Mexican people. Unfortunately, Kaiser Wilhelm soon passed away thereafter, and Norton sent his condolences. Too bad we're busy building some badass aircraft, am I right? Advances were made, especially into Mexico and Texas. Our royalist aircraft dominated the sky once more, and our forces finally pushed and stepped out of the Rocky Mountains. A light at the end of the tunnel. 1941 came and went. In 1942, welcomed new advances into Huey Long's heartland. Railroads were nationalized, and Long's own tracks were gobbled up. The first soldiers celebrated the warm waters of the Atlantic Ocean, even if we watched in worry as the constitutional American Republic disintegrated before our eyes in favor of those, syndicalists. But the worry was short-lived, as the Mexican state collapsed and capitulated, and Norton and his friends celebrated the revived claim of protector of Mexico. No more French influence in this hemisphere a second time. In fact, Norton's diplomats were able to use the leverage to strike a deal with the Internationale. Personally, I think Oswald and whoever that French dude is can see the writing on the wall. We were the ones to inherit the title of Maximilian of Mexico. In fact, it was in this jovial spirit that Norton gave direct orders to Arnold himself. End it. Long, Haywood, Reed, MacArthur, that guy in Alabama who smoked a fat ciggy, all pretenders to the throne of America. They didn't even have an emperor. Oh well. We reacquisitioned to the new industry of the conquered territories, put the people to work, signed new trade deals, appropriated the Mexican secession, and created a rump state to fill our needs. Oh look, they even have a little cute flag that looks like ours. A few minor setbacks. Sorry, I forgot to garrison the coast, and Operation Eat the Cheeseburger was pushed back a few weeks, but don't worry about that. Norton assured the populace everything was under control. We even sunk a Cindy ship. Long's forces had almost crumbled. The Midwest Union state is having more and more supply issues, and Norton's planes continue bombing, destroying, and pushing them against the rock that is the CSA even harder. With the capture of New Orleans, Huey Long was taken into custody, and the Union state officially surrendered. Thousands of trucks and guns were reacquisitioned for the supply effort, and vast swaths of the territory were now put under martial law and forcibly de-armed. Dealing with Huey Long was a problem for another time. Now, the socialists under the Pacific Empire had to defeat socialists with slightly different beliefs on the other side of America. Leftist infighting. That makes them worse than Hitler. Pushing on two fronts, it helped that the CSA was literally occupying all of Southern America and Mexico, places they also had a garrison with military police, but despite heavy casualties pushing towards the Mississippi, the Royalist forces were enthralled with heavy morale and the military-industrial complex that churned out tanks and planes that were unrivaled on the East Coast. Looks like we were pushing against disorganized militia divisions that the syndicalists can barely muster. There is light at the end of the tunnel. Hola, Presidente. I hope you like micromanaging the Air Force. After a pincer movement by General Walter Kruger, a couple of militia divisions stationed in Tennessee disintegrated, and the tank division pushed through the Tennessee River Valley, liberating St. Louis to thunderous applause. We even offed Florida, and even pushed them out of the Yucatan. Almost. It was beautiful, it was surreal, seeing the American Empire so close to victory. As the first Royalist convoys crossed into Upper Michigan, the path to the great cities of workers were unresisted. Soon, Detroit fell, and Chicago was encircled. Besieged on all sides, the Workers' Union that took Washington executed MacArthur, brought both the constitutional American Republic and the Union state to their knees, had fallen over like a soggy waffle. 600,000 men encircled and defeated in the lower Illinois winter. Ever so anticlimactic, Ohio, Illinois, and Virginia fell. With the capture of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, the last of the CSA's forces had all but surrendered. On the morning of October 30th, 1943, Bill Hayward shot himself in an underground Philadelphia bunker, dismayed by the fact that he not only lost to Republicans, but American LARPing royalists. Though Socialists scuttled the remains of their destroyer fleet, the CSA was eventually annexed, and celebrations at the newly completed Royal Palace in Norton City were planned at once. The only states left in the Americas were royalist: Canada, New England, the Pacific Empire. Of course, that's too many kings, and I'd like a nicer shade of yellow to dominate this continent. As Norton commissioned a new large raiding force with the might of the American shipyard industry, celebrations across America, well, more California only really, were short-lived, as the ruins of bombed-out industrial centers and torn-up railways littered the countryside. Not a lot of prosperity in the United States at this point. But at last, we got that Norton-certified Pacific Empire W. Congratulations, true patriots. Also, Norton's outlawing racism. That might seem like the smart move, might as well rip off the Band-Aid now. With the last of the celebrations out of the way, a small mobilized task force, around 2 million or so, began preparations to liberate the workers of Canada. Why? Because those jerks had held New England, damn it, and we are also monarchical socialists, which is totally tubular and so much better. Oh, look, the Boulder Dam was completed. Someone had the idea to name it Hoover Dam, or even Howard Hughes Dam, but I think Norton Dam is a lot better. Hughes, though? He'd be proud. Emperor Norton issued a royal decree annexing the Protectorate of Mexico, incorporating them into the Pacific Empire, and issuing them a new objective: restore true American imperialism. I think Norton is setting his sights a little high with this one, but oh well. If you're the ruler of America, do as you do. In an attempt to restore influence over political machines of the Midwest, the Progressive Party started to draft a statement in which they'd pardon Huey Long and establish him as prime minister. However, with a resurgent market liberal party of the past Democratic Republican Party, Wallace's political maneuvering was, frankly, put on hold. There's still so much to do. Trying to put the party more mainstream, reframing themselves as humanistic capitalists and away from the spiritualist Rorickism bunch, Henry Wallace, in his infinite wisdom, decided one last final victory over Canada would cement his re-election. He even established a minimum wage. However, Upton Sinclair, upset with Wallace's wheeling and dealing, pulled some strings to get Charlie Chaplin, a political activist and former silver screen actor, to be his new nominee. It seems like the Commonwealth Party was buckling at the seams, and while the sectors of the past Democratic and Republican parties loomed above, who knew who would bide their time and come out on top? Oh well, the midsummer had arrived, and to ensure operational success, Henry Wallace declared war in front of Parliament. To Field Marshal Arnold, who pioneered American deep battle planning, had cut off and secured almost every border metropolis. Vancouver, Ottawa, Montreal, Quebec City, and eventually even Halifax fell to the American Phoenix. A 4th of July celebration quickly cemented the victory, even if Norton enacted a deeply unpopular conscription to kick the Canadians out of Central America and the Caribbean. A combined effort between Norton and Wallace set up the civil government that was to rule over the United States in the peacetime. This included policies not to punish, but win over the people of a divided America. Maybe the monarcho-socialist nature of the government would help. A Freedmen's Bureau was the first start, followed by kicking out the nasty little clan left behind. The last of the Canadian resistance was all but wiped out, except for a few brutal Quebecers. Norton's raiding fleet, designed to kickstart shipbuilding jobs, was actually quickly ballooning into a Plan N, or Norton Plan, seeking to build the biggest ships ever constructed to rival both Germany and Japan. Those Canadians would be kicked out any second now. Any second now. Well, the November elections came, and despite major campaigning and debates by both Wallace's Democrats and Sinclair Chaplin's Socialists, a dark horse had been traveling across the empire. A small city councilman from Arizona, a low figure in the Republican Party and longtime member of the NAACP. His racial equality beliefs appealed to the state's dogma, but His libertarian stances on government appealed to those who had been burned by the dictators who oppressed their people, like Haywood, Long, and Alpha Murray. In a stark upset, the Socialist Commonwealth that won the war was beat out by Barry Goldwater and his Democratic Republicans, seeking to bring the empire to its full glory with the parties of the past. Despite the Socialist wartime government's victories, it seems Barry Goldwater's explosive popularity was infectious and spread all over America. His first test, however, was not passing racial legislation or deregulation. No, it was a threat from the Far East. News landed on Goldwater's desk like a bomb, so he mobilized the Royal Marines and Navy to start convoy escorting along the Pacific coast, and he began a renewed offensive against the Canadians in Central America, realizing the importance of control over the Panama Canal. That was the strategic objective of his government. In addition, the Democratic-Republican Party wasn't planning on losing their grip on power. So they formed HoI4, the House of Un-American Activities Committee, to punish those against the empire. Of course, that meant the liberals were beginning to crack down on leftism. I knew it. Shortly after re-annexing Hawaii, Norton stationed the Pacific Fleet there to intimidate the Japanese. However, before they could make it, they engaged the Japanese Pacific Fleet in battle. An inconclusive victory, both sides managed to score a few hits before disengaging. If this was any tell, this was going to be a long war for sure. With Canada finally capitulated and gone, Norton and Goldwater focused entirely on the threat from the west. Norton even laid his eyes upon a new target, the refugees of the British ruling class, the large land to the south that constantly plagued shipping on the west coast. Australia. We're even going to make the biggest battleship ever produced as the pride of Norton's fleet. How cool is that? Well, the Entente, or what was left of it, sent a diplomatic message. The other members of Canada's faction, like the Algerian French state, had surrendered to us. In exchange, Canada was ours. I think that's a good deal, goddammit. I like it. Despite a few pesky Japanese incursions into Alaska, North America was finally ours. However, there were no celebrations just yet. As the Japanese finally conquered the last of the Chinese warlords, they too had made a mighty empire of their own to rival ours. Also, due to a spelling error, we renamed Colombia to Columbia, which I think is funny. Like, that's an in-game diplomatic incident. That's kind of goofy. The puppet governments, well, more like the banana republics, were set up smoothly, minus Colombia, don't worry about it. And Goldwater's master plan in the Pacific was to island hop to Japan. Of course, his first step was annexing his fellow Anglo descendants in Australia. Following the new fleet, the Marines that kicked the Canadians out of Central America landed off the northern coast of Australia. And as more infantry engaged, they continued setting up a beachhead and soon port at Townsville. I'm glad I built that fleet. The Marines slowly made their way around the coast, and the opposition was, admittedly, stronger than expected. And, honestly, our military built more infrastructure to support the 100,000 soldiers landing each month than there were actual railroads in Australia. They should be thankful for us at this point. Of course, we were never going to stop naval production. God, those ships are beautiful. We had an empire of Japan to fight against. As we neared Canberra, Norton established the National Labor Relations Board. I'm sure that Norton has many new reforms and tricks up his sleeve. Norton II passed away peacefully in his sleep. The joke emperor, the joke movement, it had all become reality, and now the charitable emperor was finally dead. Honestly, this hit me like a ton of bricks. I was deeply disappointed, unexpected. But, in his memory, Norton was not only charitable, but bipartisan and committed. He joined Wilhelm II in heaven, an emperor swept up into absurdity at the concept of American monarchy. Well, he's now dead and absurd in heaven. Well, his son Gerard succeeds him, continuing his spirit. The empire born out of a chaotic world lives another day. Besides, they have a war to finish, and a Japan to conquer. Gerard, surprisingly, is even more radical than his father, and will be more proactive and charitable. What a sweet fellow. A worthy successor indeed. He's so proactive that he even switched the ideology of the Democratic-Republican Party to be more Hamiltonian, a shift from the libertarian aspects of the first half of Goldwater's term. In the spirit of Hamilton, we got a shit ton of domestic industry promoted, So much so, we can waste tens of thousands of guns and equipment attritioning our forces in stupid southern Australia. I swear, Norton III is gonna nuke Canberra before the night is over. Goldwater is doing Goldwater things and stripping unions of his power. And of course, there are no survivors in Canberra as the city was razed to the ground. As we charged syndicalist corporations with treason, the might of the resurgentist American industry gets my royalist blood going. We've been fighting at 10% our power for a long time. Now, it's time for Norton III to go apeshit with the arsenal of monarchy. And we would need it because Japan had united all of China under a competent Chinese puppet government, and Russia was butting heads with the Germans. Oswald was summarily executed and replaced by T.E. Lawrence, and honestly, the Internationale isn't having the best of times. Millions of men, new tanks are being developed, and by God, Columbia, it's beautiful what the U.S. and Kaiserreich can do. It's so late in the game, 1946, that we've developed the most modern tank chassis to date. These tank models would be dedicated to the late Norton, of course, and his righteous might he was going to finish what they have started. We even crushed the last major resistance in the outback. So, of course, the very successful Marines promptly landed on the island of Java with little resistance. Sure, we needed the damn rubber, but we also needed to distract the Japanese high command. Our naval forces were within sailing distance of the Japanese homeland, and slowly but surely, we built up our invasion capabilities. Army experience was of utmost importance. Norton pardoned the Federalist forces, hoping some officers that had war experience could assist. On early morning of March 31st, 1948, the 7th Army Corps under Anastasio Zagluga, a Mexican, landed on the beaches of Tokyo. More and more men landed on the shore, and the port city of Sendai was liberated. It seemed as though the Americans were here, and here to stay. It also seems that the Japanese forces weren't expecting our imperialist forces to, Tokyo down! The city was reduced to rubble, but hey, at least it was ours now. On both sides of the Pacific, Norton's eternal empire shined. Shined. Shone. Is that? Shine. As our forces pushed towards Hokkaido and the southern cities, we started to encounter tougher and tougher resistance. The hundreds of thousands of Japanese troops that were hardened from the war in China had come back to defend their homeland. We even got some counterattacks and lost Tokyo for a bit. It seemed as though the supply chains were just a bit too long, and the Japanese homeland was a bit too close. A lot of it came from the fact that we lacked an air force on the island, so for the first time, Japanese air domination crushed and strafed our forces. In the meantime, Norton enacted a royal decree giving wide amnesty to all those who fought in the wars against the Pacific government. Hoping that this would finally give the morale boost needed to reunite the Americans against the Japanese, only time shall tell. In fact, it was this boost that pardoned a lot of syndicalist POWs and gave the Socialist Commonwealth the final push they need in the re-election campaign against Goldwater's Democratic Republican Party. Also, due to the fact that deregulation had been poorly executed and the war communism industrial complex that was founded during the Civil War couldn't cope to handle it, it appears as though the radical socialists were now back in power under a new prime minister who beat out both ex-President Henry Wallace and President Goldwater. Congratulations, Charlie Chaplin. This socialist political activist was now Prime Minister of the Empire. Back in Japan, we actually kind of stalled. The supply issues were ramping up, and our soldiers were harassed by Japanese fighter production and the constant stream of Chinese materiel coming from across the sea. I'm not gonna lie, the only thing we had going for us was the forts I hastily built to protect our beachheads and our slightly bigger navy surrounding the island. While I received calls for assistance from Morocco to integrate them as the 51st state for some reason, our forces landed and secured Hokkaido and fell back to the mountains while we hunkered down and waited for the Air Force to arrive. Hey, our forces even managed to get an encirclement or two. But eventually, as the war dragged on and on, as the Royalist forces fought house by house and city by city, leaving the casualty numbers climbing to the hundreds of thousands, a well-timed secretive project completed its first test, and soon, its first mission. On July 12, 1949, a B-29 Superfortress bomber managed to take off from an airfield on Hokkaido and flew south. The Enolia Strait, as it was called, dropped a 15-kiloton atomic bomb upon the city of Hiroshima. Goodness gracious. For the first time in history, a nuclear bomb was used in war, and those Japanese didn't surrender. So we dropped a second one, and that didn't work. How many do we need to drop? I thought it was just 2. The American Air Force had superiority over the whole island. Didn't they see it was over? When the first reports of a stalemate were received by High Command, an overwhelming urge to prevent a forever deadlocked war, and my sleepiness and drowsiness to get this campaign over with, came across the military. With the click of a button, the United States Air Force dropped an atomic bomb directly on Tokyo. You better believe they'd surrender. No? Wait, seriously? They didn't? What the hell? That's it, goddammit. By Columbia, we're gonna finish this. Norton was going to release the power of the goddamn sun on that fucking island. That military was gonna be dark shadows on the ground by the time the American Empire was done with them. And before the nuclear fallout could clear, U.S. forces, ignoring the health risks, crossed the front line and pushed the entire Japanese army south and south and south. We were going to take care of that final army corps with encirclements, bombings. Good gracious, they were going to be annihilated by the time we were done with them. And well, it looks like it worked. We didn't even have to take Osaka before, well, the Empire of Japan capitulated. Looks like the emperor from across the sea came out on top. The Koreans even took time to cement an uprising, which, with the help of a few thousand shipments of M1 Garands, was more than successful. Meanwhile, a newly conscripted army of Canadians and Quebecers landed in Germany, a new ally, which, with the help of the German Kriegsmarine, was able to attempt a landing in French Algeria, putting an end to the last major foe in this war. As the last of the Japanese high command was being hunted down for war crime tribunals, the 1st Infantry Divisions landed in Algiers. It looks like we were going to help out our German buddies after all. They even managed to find time to celebrate the 4th of July. I mean, it was kinda tough because the French were preparing for and anticipating this exact landing force, and we couldn't really break out of the metropolitan area of Algiers, but my god, Columbia, we were going to hold that city. The Air Force was lacking because the battle was on the opposite side of the earth, but we did manage to find the French fleet in the Atlantic, which kinda did give us a run for our money. They sunk the battleships I stole from Iceland 2 years ago. I won't be too mad, except for the fact that I specifically told the fleet not to repair, but it's okay. Okay, maybe it's not. I just got 20,000 servicemen killed out of my own hubris, man. But this is no time to whine. The same Marines that took Central America, Australia, Indonesia, and Japan were landing in their toughest challenge yet. Gambia. Well, I tried to coordinate a 2-front invasion of the French-Algerian Republic in Africa, but those apartheidists were giving me a hemorrhoid. Do you know how terrible the infrastructure in Africa is? Fighting a modern war here is terrible. Well, don't worry, we're holding. I swear, we're holding. I wasn't gonna leave my boys in the dust. Or more like the sand. Those French punks I've been fighting for years. I'm only at war with them because they're allied with Canada. Now they're gonna get a beatdown. Well, Prime Minister Charlie Chaplin has announced the end of construction late in 1950, well timed with the news of German and Colombian reinforcements. Gosh, that German intervention was beautiful. Ignore the fact that we're being pushed out of the Gambia and... Oh, God. Is Russia pushing hard into the German Empire? Oh, that's not good news. We need to end this war in Africa, and fast. Why am I fighting the Indian Navy now? Who are the major powers in this war? Is America fighting the war? Oh, and France capitulated. Finally, thank God. Well, after a long peace treaty on June 4th, 1951, America had peace. Almost. Just a couple more nations to settle peace deals with, and the Treaty of Sacramento. We just needed to... I'm still at war with Italy? Finally, after peace with India and China, the U.S., don't mind the horrific naval defeats, was at peace. Norton III ruled supreme over a continent, an ocean, an empire. Citizens from Australia to Mexico to Quebec were now united under one ruler, one nation, one God. Those borders were not only aesthetic, but complete. Maybe it'd look better if all the world was under the empire, but well, hey, Norton was at peace with his holdings. For now, it appears as though America has embraced a new ideology, an old school, and has come out as the greatest power on Earth because of it. This is not the end, but a new beginning. And just one outcome in a multitude of worlds in the Kaiserredux universe. Maybe next time, you'll join me as we explore another one. This has been your guide, the Curious Con Man, signing out. Peace. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed listening to my voice and my terrible jokes. Now to the patrons. Thank you so much to Aaronmoonunit, Casual, Attorney at Law 2021, Bonicki, Dimijtre, Zivkovic. Thank you so much for helping support me and my channel, and I hope you have a lovely day. Peace!
I like order. It. Hell, I love you.